So in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your DNS settings for your tracker. So I'm going to assume that you've created a Cloudflare account and you're on the Add Site page. And I'm also going to assume that you don't have a domain. So I'm going to run you through actually purchasing one through Namecheap and doing your name server settings to point that domain to Cloudflare. So let's jump over to Namecheap. This is the preferred registrar for me in terms of purchasing domains for a few reasons, which I'll go over in a moment. For now, just create an account here, get to the domain search page and search for something. So I'm going to search for Zeno test domain and see what I can buy. Okay, so there's quite a few here. What to use? Usually I'll just buy something super cheap. The only thing you have to be careful of is some of these TLDs, these like .club, .co, I've found in Cloudflare can be a bit weird where you try to add them and it doesn't seem to like them. So that's one thing that you might get caught up with. Just buy a different domain if Cloudflare has a problem with it. Okay, so usually I would get something pretty cheap. .pro. .co usually works pretty well. I like .co domains. I'm going to buy that one. So the main reason I like Namecheap is that when you actually go to purchase these domains, every new domain comes with a free year of Whois, which is the system that obscures your registrant details. So when someone does like a lookup of the domain, they don't just see all your personal details, which is kind of obviously useful if you're using an affiliate marketing tracking system or a marketing tracking system. You kind of want to be a bit unlinked and disconnected from the domain, right? So Whois is free for a year, which is great. You can also get a positive SSL certificate for $1.99 so that you can actually put an SSL certificate on your server for your tracker. That's really cheap and it's a decent certificate, so I like getting that as well. I'm not going to buy it at the moment, and we'll cover how to actually deal with those certificates in a different tutorial. Okay, so for the moment I'm just going to get it for a year with Whois and go through the payment process, so I'll just skip through to the other side after purchasing it. Okay, so after that finished, I clicked on manage for my domain and it took me to this domain list. As you can see, I have a number of test domains here. So here's this domain I just purchased, so I'm going to click on manage. Okay, so here you can see our Whois is on, and the main thing that we're going to want to change here is the name servers, which you can see here. Note that if you don't use Cloudflare and you actually just want to use the DNS systems provided by your registrar, you can go to Advanced DNS here and actually add various DNS records in this system, although I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would use Cloudflare just because it's free and it's just a better DNS system to work with. Okay, so I want to change this to custom DNS, and here I need new name servers. So I need the name servers for Cloudflare, which I'm going to get by going back to Cloudflare and trying to add this domain, which I will do here. Okay, so the scan's complete. Let's continue. Yep, that's normal. Okay, so there's no DNS records to actually import from the domain. I mean, the domain's brand new, right? So there's no DNS records stored anywhere. So let's continue. If this was an old domain that you were migrating, you might see stuff there for it to import. Let's continue. As for the plan, we want free website. Away we go. Here we go. So now it says change your name servers. So we want to change to these, eta.ns. Paste this in here. Make sure you remove any spaces before and afterward. Keep it nice and clean. There we go. Click the tick. Okay, so those have been updated. See at the top here it says they may take 48 hours to take effect. Usually if you're changing an existing domain, it can take a while for these changes to propagate. For a new domain, usually this this name server change will be quite rapid, especially if you've never loaded that domain before or no one has. Okay, so I'm going to continue. That's all done. Right, and you can see here it's asking me to recheck the name servers, and it can take a while for this verification to actually complete. Usually I would set up the domain and put it into Cloudflare like first thing before I even try to install the tracker, just because the DNS side is the slowest in terms of getting things set up, and it's the side where stuff can take longer to propagate. But let's try rechecking and see if it can find the changes already. Alright, it's queued up to be rescanned, but we'll check it says check in a few hours, so I was hoping that would refresh pretty quickly, but no. Right, so in terms of the records, we want to go to the DNS section. This is where you're going to actually add the various records that point to your tracker. The main record you're going to have to add is an A record, which we'll do here. So for the name, you can just leave this blank, or I believe you can put an @ but I'll just leave it blank for the moment. And you're going to want to put your IP address of your tracker server here. If you haven't set it up yet, go and do that first. It's probably not wise to add an A record before it even exists. If you haven't set the tracker up yet, don't create the A record with some random IP and then try and load it, because then you can get caching of the actual result, and then when you change it, it takes a while to update, so just don't do that. But if you wanted to add a record, you would just add it like this. You can leave it on automatic TTL or time to live. This is essentially the expiry time of the records. For the tracker, turn this actual proxying or acceleration off. It will still work if you turn it on. There's pros and cons to turning it on or leaving it off. If you turn it on, usually it obscures your server IP, but it can cause issues depending on the situation, and it won't necessarily accelerate things. So I would recommend just keeping it off for the tracker records. This is all about caching and acceleration, and a tracker is a system that has to dynamically respond to every individual request, right? So generally that's the complete opposite to caching, which involves serving the same thing over and over to users. So it's not intuitively the best thing to turn on. Anyway, let's add that record. Oops. Okay, so you can use @ to represent the root or the apex domain. Add record. There you go. So I would of course put that to my actual server IP should it exist, but it just doesn't at the moment. Now if you were setting up if you were using a different domain and you wanted to use a CNAME record to alias to your tracker, say your tracker was trackerdomain.com and you wanted another trackerdomain.com to point to your tracker and be used as an alias, then you could add it over in that different domain settings as a CNAME, where you could add track.otherdomain.com or whatever you want as a CNAME. I wouldn't need .other. I would just need track here. If I left it as @ it would be otherdomain.com. If I put track, it would be the subdomain track.otherdomain.com, and I could point it to xenotestdomain.co, if I can spell correctly, and turn that off. And that's how I would actually add a record to point to another domain. So here you go. That's an example of adding a CNAME record. Content for CNAME record is invalid. Oops, I forgot the com. There we go. So that would be the way I would add a CNAME record to alias to my tracker if it was on otherdomain.com, which doesn't exist, so I'll get rid of that. Okay, so that's essentially all you need to do to actually set up your DNS settings for your tracker. If you currently setting up your tracker, or you've already set it up, and so this IP is already a server with the tracker installed, now you can go load that domain and actually do your installation through the installer file and so on. Okay, that's all for this short tutorial. I'll see you in the next one.